Jamie Wallis has become the first MP in Britain to come out publicly as transgender. He revealed the news in this statement. I'm trans, or to be more accurate, I want to be. I've been diagnosed with gender dysphoria and I've felt this way since I was a very young child. I had no intention of ever sharing this with you. I always imagined I would leave politics well before I ever said this out loud. There was a close call in April 2020 when someone blackmailed me, outed me to my father and sent photographs to other family members. He wanted £50,000 to keep quiet. The police were so supportive, so understanding, and on this occasion the system worked. He pled guilty and was sentenced to 2 years and 9 months in prison. For a while, it seemed as though I would be able to get on with things and move on. Being an MP and hiding something like this was always going to be tough, but I arrogantly assumed I was up for it. Well, I'm not. A few months back in September, I hooked up with someone who I met online, and when I chose to say no on the basis that he wouldn't wear a condom, he chose to rape me. I have not been myself since this incident, and I don't think I will ever recover. It is not something you ever forget, and it is not something you ever move on from. Since then, things have really taken a tumble. I am not okay. When I crashed my car on the 28th of November, I fled the scene. I did so because I was terrified. I have PTSD, and I honestly have no idea what I was doing except I was overcome by an overwhelming sense of fear. I am sorry that it appears I ran away, but this isn't how it happened in the moment. Tonight, I was reminded of the incredible support those you work with can provide. Also, I was reminded how important it is to be yourself. I have never lived my truth, and I'm not sure how. Perhaps it starts with telling everyone. That's a very brave statement. I read you so much of it because there's a lot going on there. I thought all the context was important to see. And Jamie Wallis has received a lot of public support, including from the Prime Minister. He responded to Wallis's statement at PMQs.
Mr. Speaker, the whole House will have read the statement today from my honourable friend, the member for Bridge End. And I know that the House stands with you and will give you the support that you need to live freely as yourself.
Jamie Wallis is a Conservative MP, and he said that the Tory whips have been very supportive. But that hasn't always been the impression the Tories give off publicly. The day before Wallis came out as trans, Boris Johnson opened with this gag at a dinner for MPs. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, or as Keir Starmer would put it, people who are assigned female or male at birth. We can sort of imagine them all chortling to that kind of gross joke. Boris Johnson was, of course, referring to an interview where Keir Starmer struggled to answer a question about gender and genitalia. And in his morning email, Alex Wickham suggested we can expect to see more of these jibes from the Tories as we gear up for the next election. They have clearly been preparing to make trans people a wedge issue in any upcoming election. It's not going to be pretty if they go ahead with those plans. But could Wallis's decision make them rethink? Earlier today, I spoke to Freddie McConnell, a trans journalist who writes on LGBT issues. I started by asking him about the significance of a British MP coming out as trans.
Yeah, I think it's hard to say straight away how significant this will or won't be. I think obviously Jamie Wallis has had a pretty stressful time of it and has been forced to out himself before he felt ready to. I think it's pretty despicable that we're still facing that kind of situation today, that someone could be blackmailed, especially given the hostile atmosphere that trans people currently face in the UK. I can absolutely sympathise with his reluctance to come out now and before now. And I just think it's really sad to read that, you know, he was planning to leave politics before moving on with that part of his life more privately. The fact that he obviously, I would guess, kind of felt that he didn't really have a choice, whereas I don't think gay or lesbian people still face that kind of a stark choice. So, yeah, I think I don't think he should feel any pressure to immediately go out and change the Conservative Party, especially right now when they seem to be amping up their anti-trans rhetoric literally day by day. And we're now hearing it from the Prime Minister, which is a new thing. You know, he's historically kept fairly quiet on this, which isn't good in and of itself, but it's better than him giving out these anti-trans dog whistles, which we're now hearing. I hope that he will reflect on the way he's manipulating and using the trans community so cynically to his own political ends, and that the party as a whole will stop doing that, and maybe that they will actually appoint some people in the Equalities Office who are actually interested in equalities and that it won't become a kind of a dead letter in government.
So the Conservatives, I mean, obviously, at best, have a very mixed record on trans issues. Were you at all, pleasantly surprised that Boris Johnson came out and welcomed this announcement, and that sort of in the House of Commons there was sort of, it seemed like there was sort of universal welcoming of this statement, or do you think they sort of had no choice but to do that?
Yeah, I'm pausing. It's hard to say. It's very confusing. I feel like as a trans person, you just kind of have constant whiplash in terms of trying to understand our position in society. One minute we are, literally used as a political football. Well, that's almost too gentle a way to put it. And the next, people are talking about welcoming a trans MP, or we're having this is it Free to Be Me conference later in the year. So on the one hand, you have Liz Truss sort of saying very dangerous things and spreading dangerous misinformation about trans women specifically, and then lauding the UK's approach to LGBT equality overall. I think this thing seems like a kind of continuation of that. I mean, maybe the positivity will continue. I'm happy. I'm relieved, I suppose, for Jamie Wallis that maybe, hopefully, his stress can now come to an end. Personally, like, I can't imagine the burden of having to keep that secret and worrying about it coming out in a way that you can't control. Yeah, I think there's always this tricky thing, right, for trans people, where on the one hand you have your colleagues, whether you're in politics or whether, like for me, in journalism, you have your colleagues and you're generally treated with respect. And, if you have issues, you can go to HR, and there's all these things, these routes that we can kind of pursue. And, you can even take things to tribunal, and trans people have won at employment tribunals. But then on the other hand, you have the bigger rhetoric, whether it's your newspaper and its editorial line, or whether it's your political party and their political ends. So I think that dualism will exist for Jamie Wallis. I can't really see it coming to an end in the Conservative Party, and I can't imagine how difficult that would be to navigate when you're being respected by your colleagues to your face, but then they're going out on telly, on the radio, and saying the opposite. I don't know how much longer that can go on for, to be honest.
And this announcement from Jamie Wallis comes in a week when the Conservatives have very clearly been trying to make trans issues a wedge issue, and the media have been playing their part too. And this has sort of come to the fore with many Labour politicians being asked on the radio, can women have penises? Can men get pregnant? All questions like this intended to, basically catch them out, to be provocative. How do you think Labour should respond to that? How should a Labour politician answer questions like that?
The kind of idealist in me wants to say, well, when you're asked, can a woman have a penis or can a man get pregnant, your answer should be yes, because that's the simple fact of it. And as a man who has been pregnant, obviously I can personally attest to that. And we know why that is the case. And there's lots of interesting talking points to explore on that topic. But the realist and the pragmatist in me knows that that's not really what's being asked. It's not a good faith question, right? Like, it's a trap. So I think the only thing they can do, and I think Angela Rayner did this quite well with Kay Burley the other day, is to shut it down. Because I think even anti-trans politicians and media outlets operating in bad faith about trans issues at the moment will look back in 5 or 10 years' time and feel deep shame that they reduced the conversation to this point, to like asking cynical questions about people's genitals. I think they must tell themselves that they're like doing good journalism, but it's not. It's just gross and it's not right. So yeah, I think not answering, I think refusing to answer and taking a more kind of principled stand is the right thing to do. Especially because if you do try to engage with it in good faith and talk about, what the reality is, as we've seen with people like, I think, Wedge Streeting, you can be well-intentioned, but you can also get it quite badly wrong. And that can be more damaging for trans people ultimately.
And can we talk about pronouns? Because Jamie Wallis was assigned male at birth. They've now come out as trans, but he clarified today on Twitter, I should say, that he wants to be referred to as he, him, at least for now. So, some indication that might change. Could you talk about sort of, I suppose in a way, the order that these things happen? So, I think most people would expect when you come out as trans, you change your pronouns. Could you talk about how people take this journey in different ways?
Yeah, I think that's the key thing, like different ways, right? Like, and I can only really talk about my experience, I think, in response to this question. And I can already sense before even answering it that like every single trans person will have a different response, and probably a lot of trans people won't be able to relate to even my experience. But in a way, I can relate to Jamie Wallis's experience because, and this is, I'm assuming things here, but if it comes from a place of kind of nervousness and of really, like I said, he hasn't been involved with this process. He doesn't feel ready. I mean, when I came out, I really struggled to ask people to use different pronouns for me because I hadn't been able to access the medical transition that I felt I really needed in order to sort of be who I felt I was. So as a kind of quite shy, introverted individual, it's a big thing, putting yourself out there and saying to the world, actually, this is me and it's quite different from what you thought, without having the support of like maybe hormone replacement therapy or a different appearance or a different name, to help people come on that journey with you. And I'm not saying that those things are necessary. And obviously lots of trans people don't even access medical transition at all. But I think for those that do, and for those that feel that it's necessary, yeah, that when you ask people to use different pronouns, like it's a really personal choice. I would have found it a lot easier to be on testosterone and be kind of feeling more like myself before I had to then explain that to the world. And obviously Jamie is in a public position, so it's 100 times worse, I can imagine, in terms of feeling very scrutinized and feeling like you've got to kind of do it right, and feeling like I felt like I was sort of asking quite a lot of people, to see me as someone differently, even though I'd always felt that way. Other people, it was completely new to other people. So I can imagine that he is just taking his time, and I totally understand that. And it really is a different journey for every individual, and ultimately, like, it's none of our business.